Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. So the last update about unfortunate love was how Lakshmi confronts Neelam over her accusation of trying to snatch Rishi from Malishka, and then Neelam decided to turn Lakshmi to her bodyguard during Rishi and Malishka's engagement and wedding. So let's continue from there. Sonia tells Neelam that the priest has come and they can start the engagement ceremony now. Rishi's inner self asks Rishi that what is he doing, and says what is he waiting for, and says you love someone and you are marrying someone else, and says you are ruining 3 lives, and says nobody will be happy. And his inner self asks him to go and tell Lakshmi that he wants to marry her, and he asks him to get up. Rishi suddenly gets up from the sofa and everyone is surprised. Rishi's inner self asks Rishi to go and tell Lakshmi how much he loves her. Lakshmi turns to go just as Rishi comes near her, but Rishi holds Lakshmi's hand. Shalu, Ayush and Bani get hopeful, and Grandma is happy too. Ayush says it seems that our words have worked, and Rishi will confess his love to Lakshmi now. Shalu and Bani says we will pass, and brother-in-law will pass too. Neelam is about to stop Rishi, but Virendra holds her hand and stop her, and asks her to see what is happening. Ayush says in low tone that please Rishi, confess your love to Lakshmi, and Rishi says I love you Lakshmi, and Lakshmi supporters get happy, while Malishka supporters are shocked. Rishi says, I love you, Lakshmi. I love you so much. He says, I know that you don't want me to tell this in front of everyone. Sorry, but if I don't say it now, then it will be too late. He says, I love you, and I want to make you mine, and I want to marry you. Neelam shouted Rishi, and she goes to him and asks if he is in his senses. Rishi says, I know what I am saying, and says that he is in his senses. Rishi says to Neelam that he is saying the truth, and says I was scared thinking of what you will say and what others will feel, and says this is the truth that I love Lakshmi. Neelam asks Rishi to shut up, and Malishka is upset and shocked. Rishi says, Mom, I am sorry, but I will marry Lakshmi. Neelam raises her hand to slap Rishi, but Virendra asks Neelam not to slap Rishi, and says the children are grown up now and they can make their own decisions. Virendra says to Neelam that if Rishi loves Lakshmi, then it is okay, and says Lakshmi was your choice before as well. Neelam says you are saying this now, and says that I felt Rishi and Malishka's love since their childhood. Virendra says Rishi has to feel the love and not you. He says Rishi have realized this now that he loves Lakshmi, so leave him. Neelam tells Virendra that Rishi cannot love a girl like Lakshmi. Grandma says, what are you saying? Because Art can fall in love with anyone. Neelam says Rishi loves Malishka since his childhood, and just only Malishka is made for Rishi. Malishka asks Kiran to see what Rishi has become, and says Rishi loves this illiterate girl Lakshmi, and Malishka cried. Malishka says to Kiran that I told you that Rishi loves Lakshmi, and you did not agree. She says Rishi lied to me and he betrayed me. She says Rishi is a bloody cheater and he loved Lakshmi when he was also loving me. Kiran says I did not expect this from Rishi today. Abe says I told you that the marriage should be done at the earliest, and says Rishi has to be punished for breaking my daughter's heart. Neelam says to everyone that Rishi will marry Malishka today and even right now. Rishi says I want to marry Lakshmi. Lakshmi says but I don't want to marry you, and everyone is shocked. Lakshmi folds her hand and says I don't want to marry Rishi, and Virendra asks Lakshmi that what are you saying? Rishi asks Lakshmi that what are you saying? Grandma asks Lakshmi not to be afraid and says face anything fearlessly. Shalu and Bani ask Lakshmi to also confess her love to Rishi and says you love Rishi. Bani says to Lakshmi that you have to marry brother-in-law. Lakshmi says I don't love Rishi, and Rishi also don't love me, and everyone is shocked. Lakshmi says to everyone that Rishi just cares for me and he worries for me and he sympathizes with me that what will happen with me if I go away from here, and that is all. Rishi says I worried for you, but Lakshmi interrupts and says this just care for me and not love, and Grandma asks Lakshmi that what are you saying? Lakshmi says to everyone that I stayed here for Malishka and Rishi's marriage, so they should marry as they are destined to be together. Rishi says enough and says I know about my feelings better than anyone, and says what are you saying? He asks that when did you learn to lie? He says I told you clearly that I love you, so what are you saying? Lakshmi turns her face. Rishi asks Lakshmi to look at him, and he asks her not to pretend in front of everyone. He asks Lakshmi to say it in front of everyone that she loves him. Lakshmi pushes Rishi and asks him to stay away from her. She says this is just care and sympathy because I saved your life many times, and says I don't need any reward for this. Lakshmi says to Rishi that whatever you have been doing for me is my reward, so don't meet me again after this. Ayush asks that why is sister-in-law doing this? Grandma says, didn't you hear that Lakshmi gave Rishi swear not to say this in front of anyone? And says this means that Rishi has confessed his feelings to Lakshmi before, and Lakshmi refused. Shalu and Bani says that their sister knows about Rishi's feelings and she refused. Shalu says this means that what we want will not happen now. Virendra says Lakshmi is sad. If she doesn't love Rishi, then she would have scolded him. But she herself is sad, so this means that Lakshmi also loves Rishi, but she is scared to admit it. Rishi says to Lakshmi that okay, I will not look at you again, but I will marry Malishka in front of your eyes. He says today is the last day for you here. We are together for the last time. He asks if it is fine, and Lakshmi says fine. Rishi asks Malishka to come and marry him and says you want to spend your life with me, right? Malishka is shocked and she looks at Lakshmi. Ayush goes to Rishi and asks that why are you marrying Malishka? Rishi asks that what should I do when Lakshmi refused to accept my love? He says I will marry Malishka because Malishka loves me, and Lakshmi rejected my love and broke my heart in front of everyone, and says Lakshmi is lying and she is calling my love as sympathy. Shalu says to Rishi that why are you leaving Lakshmi? Rishi says Lakshmi is the one leaving me and says that Lakshmi is going far from me and she will marry the US Rishi, and says I hope that she goes away from me. Ayush tries to make Rishi understand, but Rishi asks Ayush and Shalu to go, and Rishi gets angry. Malishka tells Kiran that Rishi made me as his second option. Lakshmi rejected him, and that is why he has come to me. Abe says I am seeing everything, and says Rishi did not do right. Kiran says Malishka's heart is broken. Abe asks Malishka if she wants to marry Rishi even after getting insulted, and Malishka says I love Rishi and I want to marry him. Malishka says to Abe that Rishi doesn't love Lakshmi and he just cares for her. Sonal says right decision. Malishka says after my marriage with Rishi, then Rishi will not look at anyone else because he will be in my control, and she asks Kiran to do some work for her before that. Shalu tells Lakshmi that she is doing wrong. Lakshmi says I don't love Rishi and says if you don't go away from here, then you will get slapped. Karishma says to Neelam that we should get the marriage done quickly before Rishi refuses again. Neelam says I will not let Rishi marry someone else. Kiran asks Neelam that what is this? Neelam says I did not know about this. Malishka cried and says if this happens again, then I will not bear it. So now comes to Rishi and asks him to choose the one who loves him and not the one who doesn't love him. She says Malishka is ready to marry you even after all this. Malishka comes there and sits beside Rishi. Karishma says, Rishi, you have hurt sister-in-law Neelam so much. Neelam says we will get you married directly now without any delay, and so now keeps the henna in front of them. Neelam asks Malishka to get the henna applied on her hands as shagun. Malishka asks Rishi to write his name on her hand with the henna. Rishi takes the henna cone and writes Rishi on Malishka's hand. Malishka thanks Rishi. She then writes her name on Rishi's hand too, while Rishi looks at Lakshmi, but Lakshmi turns her face away. Neelam asks Rishi to go and get ready for the marriage and says it is good if the marriage happens in the auspicious time, and Rishi goes away from there. Malishka comes to the room and says when Rishi proposed to Lakshmi, my heartbeat stopped for a while, and says that she only knows how to control her anger because she wants to marry Rishi, and so now says you did right. Kiran says to Malishka that let's get this marriage done fast and says I will see Lakshmi later because she is not letting me enjoy my daughter's marriage. Malishka says I am scared and I cannot enjoy my own marriage because of Lakshmi. Sonal says Rishi did right by proposing to Lakshmi and now Lakshmi has rejected him. Kiran says both Rishi and Lakshmi are not trustable and she wants this marriage to happen at the earliest and says Malishka should get ready fast. Neelam is angry and she says I was insulted so much because of Lakshmi and I will take revenge from her for all my insult once this marriage happens and I will not leave Lakshmi. Virendra and Grandma are going to Lakshmi. Neelam asks if they are going to talk to Lakshmi. Virendra says yes, Lakshmi is Rishi's happiness and we need to talk to her. Neelam says to Virendra and Grandma that I will not let you both go to talk to Lakshmi, and says that Rishi doesn't love Lakshmi, but Rishi loves Malishka, and says that Rishi just cares and sympathizes with Lakshmi. Neelam says Lakshmi has told us this also. Virendra says Lakshmi said this due to you. Neelam says whatever, but I cannot let you go to talk to Lakshmi. Neelam tells Virendra that I cannot enjoy my son's marriage due to you all. She asks them not to argue with her and go back, and Virendra looks at Grandma. Rishi comes to his room and recalls Lakshmi saying that she doesn't want to marry Rishi, and even Rishi did not love her, but he just cared for her, and Rishi gets angry. Rishi opens the drawer and finds the ring that he gave to Lakshmi during their marriage, and he thinks that Lakshmi must have kept the ring here. Shalu says my sister did not let us stay with her, and she has kept a condition that we should keep quiet when only she will stay here. Lakshmi recalls Rishi's love confession and a moment with Rishi. She recalls Rishi telling her that he will marry Malishka in front of her eyes, and she recalls Neelam's words that Rishi would never marry Lakshmi, and if Lakshmi had understood relationship, then she wouldn't have come back here, and Lakshmi cried. Neelam and Sonia comes downstairs with Rishi. Sonia tells Neelam that something should be memorable because today is Rishi's marriage. She calls the DJ. Neelam, Karishma and Sonia dance happily, and Karishma asks Rishi to dance so that everyone will come to know that he is very happy with his marriage with Malishka. Neelam tells Virendra and Grandma to celebrate and dance. Grandma and Virendra couldn't dance forcefully, and they just moved their hands. Rishi goes to the wedding altar and sits. Neelam asks the priest to start the work. Malishka comes there, and Sonia asks Sonal to dance with Malishka, and they begins to dance. While everyone are dancing, Rishi remembers how he happily danced during his marriage with Lakshmi, and he gets up from the wedding altar and goes to Lakshmi, and he makes Lakshmi wear the ring, and then puts the floral decoration garland on Lakshmi's neck and ties it just like a wedding garland, and a song plays in the background, and Malishka sees everything and she is shocked. Lakshmi gets teary eyes and she asks Rishi that why are you doing this? She shouted, asking that how much pain will you give me again and again? Rishi says I love you Lakshmi, and Ayu, Shalu and Bani smile seeing everything. Rishi says to Lakshmi that I want to marry you. Lakshmi says I don't want to marry you, and says you are making me bad in everyone's eyes, and says I told you that I don't want to marry you. Lakshmi tells Rishi that their relationship is over and she doesn't love him. She asks, why are you doing this? And says, leave me, please. Rishi says, Lakshmi. Lakshmi shouted at him, asking him to be quiet and listen to her, and says, I will never forgive you for whatever you have done just now. Rishi says to Lakshmi that don't say this. I really love you and I want to marry you, and says, I will die without you. He says, I cannot live without you because I really love you. My heartbeat and my life is just you, and I will die without you. Grandma says Rishi said this clearly and he opened his heart, and Grandma gets happy. Virendra says to Rishi that if he had said this earlier and confessed his love to Lakshmi early enough, then all this wouldn't have happened. Rishi says, I realized that I love Lakshmi much later, but I really love Lakshmi and I will keep her happy. Lakshmi says, how do I make you understand that you are making me bad in front of everyone? And Lakshmi cried. Malishka comes to Lakshmi to slap her and says, you drama queen, but Rishi hold Malishka's hand and stop her and says, don't even think of doing this. Malishka says, what happened to you, Rishi? You are humiliating me in front of everyone for Lakshmi. She asks if Rishi is not saying that Lakshmi is ruining everything, and Lakshmi is making Rishi dance on her tune, and Rishi shouted, Malishka. Malishka says to Rishi that you have stopped my hand from slapping Lakshmi, but you cannot stop my tongue. She tells Lakshmi that Rishi stopped her, else she would have shown Lakshmi's value to her. She says to Lakshmi that you are shameless, characterless and mannerless. Rishi shouted Malishka, and Malishka also shouted at Rishi to stop and not to say any word. Malishka asks Lakshmi if she has sold her self-esteem somewhere and says, I will give it back to you. She says Rishi has done so much for you and all these family members have done so much. They gave you food, clothing and shelter. She asks that what have you done in return, and she cried. Malishka asks Lakshmi if her parents have taught her this. She asks if they have given her these values. Lakshmi shouted, asking Malishka to be quiet, and Malishka also shouted at Lakshmi to let her speak. Lakshmi says to Malishka that she should be quiet and says that she can answer her back all the nonsense that she has been saying, but her values stopped her from replying her. Lakshmi says to Malishka that I can bear that you were raising your hand to me, but if you raise any question on my parent upbringing and values, then I will give you such answer that you will never see in your own eyes. She says if I was whatever you were saying, and if my values would have been bad, then I wouldn't have divorced Rishi, and I wouldn't have let Rishi marry you, and I would have married Rishi in front of you. Lakshmi says to Malishka that if I had bad values, then I would have slapped you so hard for showing your value to show my values to me. And she asks her not to raise finger on her parents and their values and their upbringing ever again. Karishma says Malishka doesn't need to raise fingers again and says to Lakshmi that don't threaten Malishka, and she asks Lakshmi to leave their house now immediately. Karishma says to Lakshmi that we did a mistake by letting a girl like you stay in the house and we have eat axe on our feet. Grandma shouted Karishma and says Lakshmi came here for my wish and she did not come here by herself. And Karishma says this is Lakshmi's cleverness and says Lakshmi makes others do work for her. Lakshmi asks Grandma not to defend her today and says if you support me today, then everyone will scold you also, and I cannot bear that. Lakshmi says you have always supported me and I don't want anything wrong to happen to you. Karishma says to Lakshmi that you have already done that. Today, Mom and my brother are against us and Ayush always talk about you. Karishma says you are inauspicious for us and for this house, so get out. Sonia asked Karishma to hold Lakshmi's hand and throw her out of the house, and Sonia held Lakshmi's hand and said she would throw her out. Lakshmi shouted, asking Sonia to leave her hand. She says, you also understand this well, that I don't want to stay here, else I wouldn't have been here, and I would have left from here. Ayush asked Lakshmi that why do you want to go away from here? He says he is the younger son of the house, and he is allowed to do mistake unlike Rishi. Then also, Rishi is proposing to you in front of everyone, and he asks Lakshmi to accept Rishi. Ayush asks Lakshmi to stay for him at least, and says you are my sister-in-law since you came here, and you are my sister-in-law now, and I'm your brother-in-law forever, and says please stay here and accept Rishi for me. Lakshmi gets emotional and says to Ayush that she was lucky to get him as her brother-in-law, and she asks him to accept Malishka as a sister-in-law now and support her. Lakshmi asks Ayush not to call her sister-in-law again, but Rishi interrupts and says Ayush will call you sister-in-law and you will be Ayush's sister-in-law forever, and everyone is shocked. Rishi says to Lakshmi that he is feeling helpless because Lakshmi rejects him, but he loves Lakshmi so much and he cannot live without her, and Rishi folds his hand and says I really love you, Lakshmi. He says I know that you can feel how much I love you, and I can feel it too that you love me, so please accept it. Rishi says I want to marry you, Lakshmi, and Lakshmi looks on. Okay guys, thank you so much guys for watching. Please don't forget to like this video, share it, and stay tuned for more updates from this channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all again in my next video. Bye guys.